Welcome back, everybody. Today's deep dive is going to be pretty fascinating. We're looking at accessible communication technology.
Okay.
And specifically, we'll be focusing on a company called Evenly. Have you heard of them?
I have, yeah. They're doing some really cool stuff, I think.
Yeah, they're really interesting. They basically help businesses and organizations provide better service to people who have, communication challenges,
Yeah.
making interactions more inclusive and accessible.
Hmm.
One of the first things that struck me when I was looking at their materials was this statistic from the World Health Organization. Apparently, 466 million people right now face hearing difficulties.
Wow.
And that number is projected to increase to 700 million by 2050.
Yeah, that's a lot of people.
That's a huge number. So
Oh.
clearly this is a, growing issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it really kind of sets the stage for how important this topic is.
Yeah.
So, when we think about communication challenges, it's easy to maybe just think about deafness or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's actually a much broader spectrum,
Right.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. It can include, like you said, people who are deaf or hard of hearing, but it also includes people with cognitive difficulties, the elderly, people who speak different languages, all sorts of different things.
Absolutely. And Evenly cites some really interesting statistics about this, too. They say that 21.3% of the European population over 65 years old, according to Eurostat, face communication difficulties.
Wow.
That's a pretty significant chunk of the population.
Yeah, for sure.
And then globally, only 19% of people speak English, according to Statista.
Interesting.
So that means that there's a huge portion of the population that might not be able to communicate effectively in certain situations.
Right.
And when you think about it, that's a pretty big barrier to access services or information or, just to participate fully in society.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is where Evenly comes in. And what they do is they've developed this platform that has a whole bunch of features aimed at making communication more inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, they offer real-time subtitling. They do instant bidirectional translation in over 150 languages.
Wow.
They have live sign language interpretation, which can be done via video call, on-site, or remotely.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. They also offer live chat, which is really useful for quick exchanges.
Yeah.
And they have a secure document exchange feature, which I think is really important when you're dealing with sensitive information.
Right.
Text-to-speech functionality, which is great for vision-impaired individuals. And, of course, satisfaction feedback mechanisms. Because it's really important to get feedback and make sure that the platform is working well for everyone.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of a whirlwind tour of all the features they offer.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to know, how does this actually work in practice?
Yeah, so there are a few different scenarios where Evenly can be used. Like, let's say you have a client who's on premise, like at a bank or a store or something like that.
Okay.
And they're using their mobile phone. They can actually activate Evenly via a QR code.
Oh, interesting.
And then they can choose their preferred method of communication.
Okay.
And then they can engage directly with a support agent.
Okay, so it's like they have control over how they want to communicate.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And then in another scenario, you might have a client who's on premise, but they're not using their mobile. Maybe they don't have a smartphone or they don't want to use it for this purpose. The agent can actually use Evenly on their end to provide, subtitling support or translation support.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah. And they can even bring in a sign language interpreter remotely if needed.
Wow, so it's really adaptable to different situations.
Exactly.
What about if the client is remote, like they're not physically present at the location?
Yeah, that's a really common scenario these days. And Evenly can be used for that too. So if the client is remote and they're using their own device, they can basically access Evenly in a similar way as if they were on premise.
Okay, so it's really like location-independent communication.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. I can see how this could be applied in all sorts of different settings. I mean, there are materials mentioned, use cases in education, events, healthcare, tourism. It's pretty versatile.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Great.
really amazing the number of different ways that Evenly can be used. And, the benefits are really clear for both the clients and the organizations that are using it.
Yeah, tell me about that. Like, what are some of the specific benefits?
Well, for clients, it's really about making communication easier and more streamlined.
Right.
They don't have to struggle to understand or be understood.
It removes those barriers.
Exactly. And that leads to higher satisfaction and a better overall experience.
Makes sense. What about for organizations?
For organizations, it's really about enhancing their service quality and meeting the needs of a wider audience.
Hmm.
It can also improve their customer service efficiency because agents can communicate more effectively and resolve issues more quickly.
Right. So it's like a win-win for both sides.
Exactly. And, there's also the legal aspect to consider.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
Well, there's the European Accessibility Act,
Right.
which mandates equal service accessibility for people with disabilities and the elderly across all EU member states.
Okay.
And in Greece, specifically, this has been transposed into national legislation
Oh, interesting.
with a compliance deadline of June 2025.
So that's coming up pretty quickly.
Yeah, it is. So businesses really need to start thinking about how they're going to comply with these regulations. And, it's not just about avoiding penalties.
Okay.
It's also about tapping into a wider market and becoming more inclusive.
Yeah, it's a smart business move.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And it also enables them to comply with ESG principles, environmental, social, and governance.
Right. Which are becoming increasingly important for businesses these days.
For sure.
So it sounds like Evenly is really well positioned to help businesses navigate this changing landscape.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, all this talk about features and benefits and legal compliance is great. But I think what really matters
Yeah.
is whether Evenly is actually making a difference in the real world.
Right.
And they actually have some really impressive success stories to share. They've got a client portfolio that includes some big names like the Public Power Corporation and Athens International Airport.
Wow. Those are big clients.
Yeah, they're pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
And their user satisfaction scores are through the roof. They have a 9.5 out of 10 net promoter score, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's really high.
And I think what's really cool is that they're not just talking about numbers. They're actually talking about real-world impact. So, for example, in their first year of operation, they helped over 750 individuals gain access to services that they wouldn't have been able to access otherwise.
Wow, that's amazing.
They facilitated over 1 million seconds of barrier-free communication.
Incredible.
And over 10,500 conference attendees experienced full accessibility thanks to their platform.
That's pretty incredible for just their first year.
Right. It's
Yeah.
pretty amazing. And they have some really great quotes from satisfied clients. Like, for example, Yeli said that Evenly has helped us to become more inclusive and accessible to all our customers.
That's awesome.
And Athens International Airport has said that Evenly has created a more welcoming environment for all travelers.
I love it.
So it really seems like they're making a tangible, positive impact on people's lives.
Yeah, for sure.
But all this begs the question, how does it work? What's the technology behind all of this? So they talk about a SaaS platform and all these fancy algorithms, but I'm not a tech expert.
Yeah.
So can you break it down for me in simple terms? Like, how does this all actually work?
Sure. So basically, Evenly is what's called a SaaS platform, which stands for Software as a Service,
Okay.
which means that it's available instantly online without any complex integration.
Oh, so you don't have to install anything special.
Exactly. You just log in and you're good to go.
That's pretty convenient.
Yeah, it is. And it runs on the Microsoft Azure cloud, which is known for its high performance and security.
Right.
And they can even deploy it on a company's Azure tenant account if they want to have even more control over their data.
Interesting.
And the cool thing about their technology is that it's designed to be really adaptable and to keep up with the latest advancements.
Mm-hmm.
So they're constantly adding new features and improving their algorithms. And it's all been certified by independent security auditors, so you can be sure that your data is safe and secure.
Okay, that's good to know. But what about the algorithms themselves? Like, what makes them so special?
Right. So Evenly has a few core components to its technology. First, they have this ready-made platform
Okay.
that offers a comprehensive set of use cases and has a really intuitive, user-friendly interface. They really put a lot of emphasis on user experience, which I think is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're dealing with people who might have communication challenges, you don't want to make it more complicated for them.
Exactly. And then they have this really cool thing called a proprietary AI integration layer.
Okay, what's that?
So this is basically a middleware that seamlessly integrates various proprietary and best-of-breed third-party algorithms.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand what that means.
So basically, it's like they're taking all the best algorithms from different sources and combining them in a really smart way to get the best possible results.
Oh, so it's like they're not limited to just using their own technology.
Yeah.
They're kind of like cherry-picking the best of everything out there.
Exactly. They're constantly looking for ways to improve the performance of their platform.
That's pretty impressive. What are some of the specific algorithms they're using?
Well, they have a whole bunch of specialized algorithms that they're constantly developing and refining.
Hmm.
For example, they use multiple speech recognition engines concurrently.
What does that mean?
So instead of just using one speech recognition engine, they use several at the same time.
Why do they do that?
It helps to maximize accuracy because each engine has its own strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's like having a team of experts working together to get the best possible result.
Exactly. And they also do domain-specific optimization.
With that.
So basically, they can train their algorithms on specific vocabulary and terminology that's relevant to certain industries.
Okay.
So, for example, if you're a hospital, they can train evenly on medical terminology so that it's more accurate when translating conversations between doctors and patients.
Oh, that's really smart. So it's not just a generic translation app. It's actually tailored to the specific needs of different industries.
Exactly. And that makes a huge difference in terms of accuracy and usability.
So it sounds like Evenly is really at the forefront of accessible communication technology. They're not just using off-the-shelf components. They're actually developing their own technology and constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Yeah, for sure. They're a really innovative company, and I think they're going to continue to make a big impact in this space.
Well, that's all really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it
It
is.
really gives us a lot to think about. So we're going to take a quick break right now.
Okay.
And when we come back, we'll delve even deeper into the future of accessible communication and explore some of the exciting possibilities that lie ahead. So stay tuned.
That sounds good.
We'll be right back. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what Evenly is doing right now to make communication more accessible,
Yeah.
but I'm really curious about what the future holds for this field. You mentioned earlier some pretty amazing possibilities with things like AI, VR, and brain-computer interfaces.
Yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in those areas.
So let's dive into that a little bit. What could those technologies specifically bring to the table in terms of accessibility?
Well, imagine for a second AI that can not only translate languages like really accurately in real time, but also understand things like tone of voice,
Yep.
cultural context, even like nonverbal cues.
Wow.
That would be huge for people with autism, for example,
Yeah.
who often struggle to interpret those kinds of social signals.
That's a really good point. It's like giving everyone a universal translator.
Right.
But not just for words, but for like the whole spectrum of human communication.
Exactly. And then
Yeah.
you've got VR and augmented reality,
Mm-hmm.
which could be used to create these immersive experiences that go way beyond the limitations of physical spaces.
Okay.
So, like, imagine someone who has mobility issues
Yeah.
being able to attend a concert virtually or travel the world, all thanks to accessible VR technology.
That would be incredible.
Yeah.
I can also see that being really useful in education.
Oh, absolutely.
Like imagine students with learning disabilities interacting with these virtual environments that are specifically designed for their needs.
Right.
It can make learning so much more engaging.
Yeah, for sure. And more effective, too.
Exactly.
And then there are brain-computer interfaces.
Okay, now we're getting really futuristic.
I know, right? It's still early days, but
Yeah.
the potential is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So imagine being able to communicate directly using your thoughts.
Wow.
You wouldn't need speech or physical movement at all.
That would be revolutionary.
Right. Especially for people with severe disabilities who can't currently communicate.
Yeah. It sounds like something out of science fiction,
Yeah.
but it's becoming more and more realistic.
Yeah, the technology is advancing so quickly.
It really makes you wonder what the world's going to be like in like 50 years.
I know, it's exciting.
Yeah.
A little daunting too, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's really important that we think about the ethical implications of all this as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, how do we make sure that these technologies are accessible to everyone,
Right.
not just people who can afford them or who live in certain parts of the world?
That's a really good point. We don't want to create a digital divide where certain groups are left behind.
Exactly. And we also need to think about data privacy and security,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're talking about AI systems that are collecting all this personal information.
Yeah, it's a lot to consider.
It is.
But I think it's a conversation that we need to have now
Yeah,
as these technologies are being developed.
absolutely.
It's much easier to address ethical concerns from the start than to try to fix problems later on.
Exactly. It's like building a house. You want to make sure the foundation is strong.
Exactly. So do you think companies are thinking about this?
I think some are, and I think Evenly is a really good example of a company that's doing things right.
Okay.
They're not just focusing on the technology itself.
Yep.
They're also committed to transparency, user privacy, and making their solutions accessible to as many people as possible.
That's great to hear. But it's not just up to companies like Evenly, right?
No, it's a collective effort. We all have a role to play in shaping the future of accessible communication.
So what can our listeners do?
Well, I think it starts with raising awareness. Talk to your friends and family about this issue.
Okay.
Advocate for accessibility in your communities. Support organizations that are working to bridge the digital divide.
Those are all great suggestions.
And, challenge your own assumptions about how communication should work. Be open to new possibilities.
That's a really important point. I think sometimes we forget that there are many different ways to communicate
Right.
and that diversity is actually a strength.
Absolutely. It's about creating a world where everyone has the tools and resources they need to connect and communicate effectively, regardless of their abilities.
Beautifully said. I love that. It's a vision worth striving for.
Yeah,
And I think technology can play a huge role in making it a reality.
I agree.
So, as we look ahead to this future of limitless possibilities, what are some key takeaways you want our listeners to remember from our deep dive today?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that communication accessibility is not a niche issue.
Right.
It affects everyone in some way, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah.
And technology is evolving rapidly. It has the potential to break down barriers in ways we never thought possible.
I agree.
And it's up to all of us to make sure those advancements benefit everyone, not just a select few.
Those are really powerful takeaways. And I think they give us both a sense of hope and responsibility as we navigate this ever-changing world.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. We've covered a lot of ground today. It's been really fascinating to explore this whole world of inclusive communication.
Yeah, it has.
We started by talking about just how many people face communication barriers.
Right. It's a huge number, like 1 in 9 people globally.
Yeah, and it really underscores why this is so important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it affects all of us in one way or another.
It does, yeah. And I think what's so important to remember is, this isn't about, changing people or making them fit into some sort of predefined box of how they should communicate.
Right.
It's about making the world around us more adaptable,
Exactly.
more flexible to different ways of communicating.
Yeah.
And technology, what Evenly is developing, it really shows how much potential there is to do that.
Yeah. It's amazing, like real-time translation, live captioning, even connecting someone to a sign language interpreter right there on the spot.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's really, really cool stuff. And I love that they're focused on that human connection piece as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's really what it's all about, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And the thing is, this is just the beginning, right?
Yeah, it feels like we're on the verge of something huge.
We've talked about all this stuff with AI and VR and even brain-computer interfaces.
Right.
And, I mean, that just has the potential to, blow everything wide open.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine, like you said, a world where communication barriers are a thing of the past.
That would be incredible.
It would.
But of course, like we've talked about, it's not just about the technology itself. Right?
Yeah, no, not at all.
We have to make sure it's accessible to everyone,
Exactly.
regardless of their background, their income, where they live.
Right.
We don't want to create a digital divide where certain groups are left behind.
Exactly. And I think it's important to think about digital literacy too.
Yeah.
Making sure people have the skills and knowledge to use these technologies effectively.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So if our listeners are thinking, okay, what can I do? It's not just about buying the latest gadget, right?
Right.
It's about advocating for accessibility in your communities.
Yeah.
Supporting organizations that are working to bridge that digital divide.
Absolutely. And honestly, sometimes the simplest thing you can do is just be patient and understanding. If you meet someone who communicates differently than you, just take that time to listen, to learn, to find a way to connect.
That's beautifully said. I think that's a perfect note to end on. So I want to thank you for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been so fascinating to explore this topic with you. And I hope our listeners have found it informative and thought-provoking and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
I hope so too.
We've learned about the incredible progress that's being made in the world of accessible communication, but also the challenges that still remain.
Right. It's an ongoing journey.
It is, yeah. And it's a journey we're all on together. So let's continue to challenge our assumptions, to be advocates for inclusivity, and to embrace the amazing diversity of human communication. Because when everyone has a voice, we all benefit. Thanks for listening.